Take a breath and settle in. Welcome to Metaphysics at the Movies, the podcast where film meets deeper meaning and every scene becomes a doorway to insight. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing someone who doesn't just watch movies, he reads them. Reverend Rich P. is a Unity minister, speaker, and teacher of practical spirituality, known for blending real-life wisdom with metaphysical truth in a way that's grounded, accessible, and powerful. Around here, it's not just about what's happening on the screen. It's about what's happening within us as we watch. So whether it's drama, comedy, or action, Reverend Rich P. helps us uncover the spiritual principles, the hidden patterns, and the deeper messages woven into the stories we love. Get ready to see movies differently, and maybe even see yourself differently too. Let's get into it.
Welcome to Metaphysics at the Movies, where we don't just watch the films, we wake up through them. I'm Reverend Rich P., and this space is about practical spirituality, finding the deeper meanings, the hidden patterns, and the spiritual principles woven into the stories we love. Because every movie is more than entertainment. It's a mirror, a message, a moment of awakening if we're willing to let it. And today we're stepping onto the field with the film Facing the Giants. Now, of course, on the surface, it's a football movie. Underdog, struggle, comeback. We've seen it in so many different films. But underneath, this is a story about belief, about identity, and what happens when you stop letting circumstances define you and start letting spirit lead you. We're going to break down what this film teaches us about faith beyond fear, action beyond doubt, and trusting something greater than what we can see. So don't just listen for the plot, listen for the principle, because somewhere in this story is your story. So let's get into it. So as I said, the movie today we're going to be following is Facing the Giants. If you've never heard of the Kendrick brothers, they've done a number of movies such as War Room, Overcomer. There's a movie they're actually going to remake called Flywheel. And one of my favorites, Courageous. If you're a dad, you definitely need to watch that movie. But we'll be talking about that over the next couple of weeks, as I'll be focusing on the Kendrick movies, and then we'll be moving on from there. But today we're talking about Facing the Giants, one of my favorite movies, one of my first movies to actually in this series, and one of my favorite Christian movies out there. There's so many great ones, but I'm a big fan of the Kendrick brothers. So if you haven't had a chance to see any of their movies, look them up, check out their movies. And if you haven't watched Facing the Giants and don't want to dive into spoilers, then I would suggest pausing the podcast here and go ahead and watch the movie, and then come back and see if what I see is what you saw in the movie. But if you're okay with moving forward, then let's go ahead and get started. So first note in the movie, again, as you begin to watch the movie, the story starts with the coach and the team having a big losing streak, and they're known for it. People are upset about it, and he's struggling as to how can he change it. So what we need to realize is that the losing streak isn't just about bad luck. It's actually a mirror. So we need to reflect on the first principle here. The outer game reflects the inner game. Metaphysically, life always reflects consciousness, not punishment, not randomness, just reflection. Coach Taylor doesn't just change plays, he shifts his beliefs. Because the moment belief shifts, behavior follows, and the results catch up. So our principle here pretty much is your world doesn't change until your inner story does. As a life coach, one of the practices I do with my clients is to rewrite your life story. And the reason for that is if we continue to look at our past, not learn from it, but continue to watch our past. It's kind of like they say when you're driving, watching the rearview mirror, you're destined to crash. But if we can rewrite our story, change our beliefs, we can begin to move forward. So on this principle, let's go ahead and say, as always, our practice for this week is ask yourself, where can I already defeat it in my thinking? Where am I already defeating in my thinking? Where have I already decided that it will never work out for me? And let's begin to identify it, and we'll begin to change it. So next principle, one of my favorite scenes of the movie, the death crawl. I've used this clip in my talks at Unity, and it tends to scare a couple of people because, a lot of people come and they're looking for that softness, that inner peace based on no work, just some meditation or some prayer. And all of those tools are wonderful, but to me, it takes action to get to where you want to be. So what the death crawl actually represents here is faith beyond sight. And this scene hits for a reason. We watch as he's blindfolded, he's exhausted, and he's ready to quit. And yet, he goes further than he thought possible. If you remember the scene in the movie, he tells him what he thinks he can reach. And the coach gives him some short distance goals, but changes that at the end. And this is not motivation. This is actually metaphysics. Faith is not seeing the outcome. Faith is moving without needing to see it. So your principle here is your perceived limits is rarely your actual limit. Some of my talks, I used to tell people to raise their hand. It's like, all right, you raised it as high as you could. Now raise it a little more. And it showed that the limits that they thought they'd set were the limits they could reach, and they could do so much more. So let's not let your glass ceiling stop you when you can shatter it to become the best you can. So our practice this week, pick one area where you've been holding back and now go 10% further than you feel comfortable. This will be your new edge, your new ceiling. And just think, after the first 10%, how much further can you go? So let's move on to our third principle here, acting as if before evidence shows up. The team starts showing up differently before the win comes. They practice harder, speak different, expect more. You don't have to wait for proof to embody the truth first. And this is straight out of the teachings from Charles Fillmore's thinking. Act as if. So the principle here, you don't act based on results. You act based on identity. Don't wait for the results before you start acting as a winner. Know you're a winner and start acting as it. So today, move toward a version of you who has already succeeded. Not fake, not forced, just aligned with that person. You know who he is. He's right there waiting for you. And number 4, let's talk about surrendering isn't a weakness. It's alignment. If you're a fan of Brené Brown, she has changed the look of surrender to show you that in surrender is where you find your strength. And there's a moment where control is released and trust steps in. It's not about giving up, but giving over. Metaphysically, that aligns with divine order. You do your part and release attachment to how it unfolds. Our principle is that control blocks flow. Trust opens it. So this week, where you're gripping too tight, loosen your hold, not your commitment. Commit to the action. Move in faith. But lose the need to control the outcome. Just let it flow. And you'd be surprised what you'd see. And the number 5 principle here is praise before the breakthrough. One of the core teachings in the film gives thanks before the victory. That's not emotional hype, but it's spiritual law. Being in a state of gratitude shifts your vibration, and what you hold in consciousness tends to express. Call it manifest, or even reap what you sow. When you sow gratitude into everything you do, even before the outcome you're waiting for shows up, you will see how things will change in your world. So the principle here is gratitude is not a reaction, it's a creative force. So this week, I want you to speak appreciation for something that hasn't happened yet, as if it's already on its way. Usually when I'm asked to pray at a unity event, one of the things I say is to remember that Jesus would give thanks to the Father before the miracle happened. And in turn, we give thanks knowing that what we pray in affirmation is already done. And so it is, and so we let it be. And it's that understanding that gratitude is a power to manifest, a power to express, and a power to sow into that which we want to reap. So with that being said, the film is asking one real question. Who are you when the scoreboard says you're losing? And that's the work, to know that you're enough. And if you're willing to take faith into action, there is nothing that you cannot accomplish. So do the work, not when it's easy, not when it's obvious, but right there in the uncertainty. So here's your homework this week. Catch that limiting thought, replace it with truth, and act from that truth immediately. No delays and no debates. Take that truth and walk with it. Peace and blessings, and I'll see you next week as we discuss the movie War Room.
And just like that, the credits start to roll. But here's the truth. What you saw in the movie is already playing out in your life. So the question is, what are you choosing to believe? What role are you stepping into? And what truth are you ready to live? That's the work. If this episode spoke to you, don't just sit with it. Walk with it. Apply it. Live it. Let it move through you. And if you're ready to go deeper, more teachings, tools, journals, and ways to activate this in your everyday life, head over to revrichp.com. That's where the conversation continues. Until next time, keep watching, keep awakening, and take that truth and walk with it. Peace and blessings.